I'm David Murray, Executive Director of Sustainability First.
David, thank you for talking to the Affinity Water podcast series. We're looking at our water resources management plan, which has just been published in autumn 2022, when we're looking to the future of our water supplies across our three regions and pointing out there's going to be a deficit. So first of all, what does your charity, Sustainability First, do?
So we're a think tank, but we're a registered charity, so we're politically neutral. We work in the water, energy and telecoms sectors with businesses, with regulators, with policymakers to think about sustainability in practical terms and understand how we might be able to better embed it in everyday business practice and strategy and support a community level right through to the nation level, the understanding that sustainability is such an important part of a thriving nation.
And people might be surprised to link sustainability for water, because water is something we turn on a tap, it comes out. We might not think of the long-term future of our water supplies.
Completely, yeah. I think that's the issue, isn't it? It's so easy and convenient for us to access water that it's done subconsciously every day. We turn on the tap and we don't think twice about it. And I suppose that's part of being a part of one of these leading economic powerhouse nations in the world, is that these things that really are the lifeblood of everything are completely taken for granted. And so the risk, therefore, is that we undervalue the value of water in every sense. So how much it costs for us to get that potable water through our taps to drink it, and what we're doing with water as it goes out through the waste management of that back into that cycle again for it to come back for us to use. So why, within sustainability terms, I suppose at the moment so much around the environment seems to be about climate change, and of course water is also a problem and a solution connected to climate change, but water itself is a massive issue when it comes to sustainability in so many ways.
And in our water resources management plan, where we're looking ahead, we do talk about climate change and the pressures of a growing population too, which means we are going to have a water deficit. We're tackling that, and we point out that we're going to invest in new infrastructure, we're going to tackle leaks, and we're also asking our customers to change their water use behaviours. We have a campaign called Save Water, Save Our Streams. If we're looking to the next 5 years, what are the challenges facing the water industry?
Yeah, so I think you've hit the nail on the head there, that you'd be forgiven for thinking that we have a water deficit in a place that seems to rain more often than we'd like to believe. But of course we've still got hosepipe bans in Kent where I live, in spite of the fact that the reservoirs are starting to replenish. The requirements from industry of abstraction of that water for use in heavy industry as well as for us as everyday consumers is huge as well. And climate change creates this uncertainty of the weather patterns that we're used to, the aquifer levels, the water levels that we've got access to, and of course the impact that would have on the environment based on those limits. You know, the amount of water we can safely extract for our use, for whatever that purpose might be. So I think what's good to see is that the price review that's coming from Ofwat at the moment for the water industry is encouraging the industry to think longer term. So thinking 5 years is great. Let's think 50 years as well. What does the future look like for the UK? What's the absolute utopia for sustainability in terms of water access? So that we're not having to think about droughts in the way that maybe we've never thought of before, and we're not thinking about the impacts of floods in the way that we've ever thought of before. We must adapt, and adaptation is a part of that. So I think the challenge back to the industry is to think in an adaptive way and to understand what that means for the sector, but then to translate that into a way to understand for the public to get behind as well. Because as I said before, that kind of subconscious turning on of the tap means we're not thinking about water in the way that the water industry is every day. And so there's this communication challenge that's there for the sector too.
We have produced the Affinity Water Resources Management Plan. There's also an Eastern Region Water Resources Management Plan and a Southeast Water Resources Management Plan, where all the water companies join up to plan, as you said, for this 5-year and 50-year future. But we had a long, hot summer. Some water companies, as you said, David, introduced hosepipe bans. Affinity Water takes its water reserves from chalk aquifers. We haven't introduced a hosepipe ban, although we are monitoring that going into the winter, and we'll be making announcements perhaps in early spring. But do you think that customers and the public understand where we get our water from and why things like a hosepipe ban are introduced?
So I suppose starting with the last bit first about the hosepipe ban, that's an instant action that's urgent. So there's, it's not a decision that's taken lightly by a water company or local authorities and others to say we must talk to the public about reducing the amount of water we're consuming and thinking about how we're consuming water when it's a subconscious act every day. You mentioned the chalk streams. Well, we are awash with chalk streams. They're globally important, and we've got sort of those habitats within the UK. They're so sensitive to stress. And so we need to be thinking about the environmental impact as well as consumer impacts.
And that's something our water resources management plan does, because we're abstracting less from the chalk aquifers and thereby having to bring in new water resources to the region. And we're doing that through one of our schemes, strategic resource overview, is to use the Grand Union Canal to take wastewater from the Midlands down to our region in the south. But again, this is something that the public haven't really got their heads round.
Completely. And I think we should forgive the public for not getting their head around, especially at the moment when there's an energy crisis and a cost of living crisis. We've got more than enough things to worry about without adding other worries. So I think what's important, therefore, is that the communications that come to the general public are simple to understand, and they show what the benefits are to that individual. We're all essentially individualistic, even though we may have a sense of community as well. So what's in it for me? Why would I take part in a hosepipe ban? Why wouldn't I wash my car or water the garden? Why would I or wouldn't I do that thing? And to get that message across repeatedly is so important. And with a deeply complex water system, with water companies, some of which manage both water, fresh water and wastewater, some that only do one or the other. This is additional complexity that just doesn't really need to feature in the way that we're talking to the public. If we're thinking about water, we might instantly think about flushing the toilet just as quickly as we would turning on that tap. So what are all of the water messages that we need to get across? What are the actions that we're hoping for those individuals to take? What are the benefits to them, and what are the risks of not doing that? And I suppose part of that comes to, sadly, about the pricing of water itself. I think, sadly, we're economically undervaluing the cost of the service of water as well.
It's too cheap.
It's too cheap. And that's the worst thing to say right now. It's one of those, find me a politician who says we should put the price of something up at the moment. And they won't. So actually, we shouldn't shy away from that. We should be thinking, if we're thinking long-term as a sector, government should be thinking long-term as well about how we're going to address that problem.
So if we are going to invest more in our water resources, then perhaps putting up the price of water it would be doing an environmental good.
Yeah, and I suppose there's this we're all in this together thing here. So I think it's all well and good asking people to stomach a rise in the price of water and encouraging people to consume less. And of course, if it costs more, then instantly we'll consume less. We're seeing that with energy, sadly, at the moment as well. So if we're all in this together, how can we all do something to address this issue? For example, there must be ways for us to be able to retrofit housing so that we're not using fresh water to flush our toilets. Grey water systems, all of these things are proven to exist. We know that they work. We just need to find a way to encourage people to make positive consumption decisions in favour of the planet as well as their pockets.
So, David, let's just take a few minutes, go inside a house and listen to what those sounds of water are. Now, Affinity Water has been leading behavioural change amongst its customers. They've responded well to date. It's called Save Our Streams. We're now on a phase 2 of it, and we're trying to drive down personal water consumption because it's higher in our region than elsewhere. The government is also legislating for us all to use less water, our personal consumption in our houses. We as a water company and other water companies are trying to work on these different levels of different kinds of investment, more investment, driving down leakage, because we know that's something that might prevent customers making a change in their own behaviours. And Affinity Water is a water-only company, the largest water-only company in the UK. But where water companies are also in charge of sewage, of course we have the problem that's making the headlines about sewage discharges into our rivers and seas. How do you view that?
I think it's an absolute atrocity that water management and the companies behind that are allowed legal limits of pollution at the levels that we've seen them at, and that's okay, that there are no penalties for that, and there are no incentives to do anything about it to bring those legal limits down. I think we need to give more power to the Environment Agency. I think we need to make those limits much tighter, and I think we must do something about this at a political and company level, as well as a consumer behaviour level. In fact, I suppose we've seen it even more through these lockdown years because people have got closer to nature and they've gone sea swimming and wild swimming, and they've gone fishing and they've actually found that now this water that they're swimming in or fishing in is so important to them in so many different ways, and it's not just the environment that's suffering, it's people who are suffering with this too. We must change something about it. It's impossible to believe that it's legally okay to pollute when our seas are is the single biggest carbon sink that we've got too. So we've got to respect water way more than we are.
And of course that again stops the behavioural change, doesn't it? If people think the water companies are doing the wrong thing, whatever that is, if it's price, if it's leaks, if it's sewage, as I said again, Affinity Water is water only. But this stops consumers changing their behaviours.
Absolutely. Yeah, why should I change my behaviour if everyone else around me isn't changing theirs? And the flip side, that if the behaviours are positive behaviours and they're being celebrated and championed and shown to be moving in the right direction, that's when you start to get a groundswell of behaviour change at the individual level. It looks good to do it, and there's a taboo if you don't. So if we're thinking about consumers changing their behaviours, absolutely in parallel, we must be changing the way the behaviour of industry, the behaviour of legislation, the behaviour of regulation to go with it. Otherwise, we're not going to get that change at the consumer level.
And in terms of your charity, Sustainability First, David, what are you doing on the waterfront? Because we've talked about it in a very parochial UK context, but of course it is an international problem, whether it's the security and national infrastructure of water, as we've seen in Ukraine, whether it's, of course, global warming and what's happening to those countries who are more in the front line where, their homes are being flooded. What are you doing?
Yeah, so I suppose the freedom of being a think tank and a charity, we're independent thinkers, and we'll draw from case studies and examples all around the world. Even though our focus is on delivering sustainability in Great Britain, we look to the world to find those solutions that either already exist or the innovations are happening wherever they might be. And when it comes to the water industry, one of the things that we try to do is bring not just the water industry closer together with information sharing and best practice, but also cross-sectorally. So we borrow from the energy and the telecom sectors that we're also working closely with to share some of those ideas about behaviour change, about engagement with the general public, about innovation in regulation, about incentivising the right move for companies to head in the right direction when it comes to sustainability. That's what we do. We're that kind of convener of thought leadership and the sharing of best practice examples.
Because the National Grid is encouraging people to turn off their washing machines and dryers from 4 till 7 at night. And when you come to save our streams or save water, save wildlife, we're saying the same thing with water. Think about the prime time use of water. Use a shower, not a bath. Make your shower 2 minutes, not 4 minutes. Get a water butt. Don't water your garden. Coming back to the hosepipe ban. Perhaps issues like hosepipe bans we should be thinking of as nudge, changing our behaviours and not thinking, well, this is a bad thing.
Completely. Just to think about water butts as a quick example, I saw something a couple of weeks ago that said that if a whole community was to install water butts where they hadn't previously, the impact on flood risk is huge. You could go from a 30-year flood risk to a 50-year flood risk just with this really small cost intervention from maybe subsidised from water companies to encourage that water behaviour change. So it slows down the speed with which water enters the system, and it then is available when we're in drought and we still need to water the garden and wash the car. We've got this water available to us. There's a simple intervention that can be done at the most local of levels at your home.
Have you had a bath this week or a shower?
I'm obviously standing in the wrong direction from the wind with you right now. Yes, I've had showers. I can't remember the last time I had a bath. Weeks ago.
A water butt?
Water butt, got a water butt. Yeah. Got two, in fact.
Okay. And when do you use a dishwasher or wash up in the sink?
Word. So I must admit we're a family with 4 children and 2 dogs and 4 cats. So we are very consumptive when it comes to our utilities at home. But I'm also very conscious of not just the environment, but the cost to us in using those utilities. And I'm very open to changing my behaviour in a way that's beneficial to my family and to the environment at the same time. I think there's so much that can be done at the individual level, so long as the information is clear and it's accessible, and so long as it's obvious that everybody else is also in this same boat together trying to do something. And I think environmental concern is really heading up the public psyche, and it's not going anywhere. So why don't regulators, politicians and companies do more to show their colours too?
And of course it is now not the CSR agenda, the corporate social responsibility. It is environment, social and governance. So it really is trying to enter the psyche of organisations.
Yeah, it is, but it's also, I suppose, that shift is saying that there's value to be had here as a company. So I can prove to my shareholders and to those who are thinking about investing in my company that the things that I'm doing that are right for the planet and for people are also right for this business. And so there is value to be had. There's economic value to be doing the right thing here as well. This isn't just for the goodness of out of the hearts of companies. It's also that there's value to be added by doing the right thing. And ESG is a great mechanism for monitoring that and the stewardship that goes with it when shareholders are thinking about whether or not that company is performing well. So it's great to see, even though it's a shift from one set of letters to another set, that shift is more about how this is now central to a company rather than a nice thing to do to add to our annual report.
It's about education at a consumer and company level.
Completely. Yeah, absolutely is.
Of course, David, water companies do offer customers help with paying their bills should they need it. At Affinity Water, you can find out more by going to affinitywater.co.uk/billing/struggling to pay. So there is help for those in financial need. David Murray, thank you very much indeed for talking to the Affinity Water podcast series today and about your charity, Sustainability First. Thank you.
Thank you.